Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast, Season 6, Episode 20, talking about the Buffalo Bills and Pittsburgh Steelers season opening matchup today.
I got a little bit ahead of myself.
I
got a little bit
John
too
Keir,
excited knowing that
Austin
Steelers football was going to be back tomorrow.
Austin, welcome back to the show, buddy. How you doing?
I was not. That was a great game for me.
Oh, you're supposed to save the screaming
I own
for
Amari Cooper
when the games actually start, man.
I'm in, so that was a fantastic game. I'm versing John week 1 in one of the leagues.
Were you yelling at the TV watching the Thursday night game between Dallas and Tampa Bay the other night?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, asshole. Yeah, I have Dak Prescott, which it was great. He had a great game, but
they started out strong by getting that 3-and-out
most productive plays went to Amari
defense,
Cooper,
which
so
was
just
not
kind of
something I
canceled
expected.
that out.
I mean, the wide receivers completely outmatched
but such
the
is
Cowboys
life,
cornerbacks. I mean,
what did
Antonio
you
Brown
think of the game
looked
itself?
like he
It was pretty darn
He looked like
entertaining.
Steelers Antonio
Dallas
Brown, which
held up
was
better
scary
than I
when
thought they would.
He's supposed to be wide receiver 3 behind Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Mike Evans actually kind of he didn't really appear in the game, but he's still like a decent wide receiver. I always thought he was overrated. Going on a tangent, though. But yeah, no, they should have been completely outclassed offense and defense-wise, and it really wasn't that bad. Yeah, they gave up 30 points, but it was surprisingly close. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's not a good Dallas defense that they have there. And I think that it may have taken some strides, but when you're facing an offense as loaded as that one in Tampa is, you mentioned Mike Evans, even if you don't think he's as good as maybe the
Thinking of CD reminds me CD and Deontay Johnson are the same player. You can't convince me otherwise.
So,
they're literally
Godwin,
the same person.
I know he came up with the big catch at the end of the game, but that guy's got a problem with drops.
Yeah, he doesn't drop as much, but they're pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think CD's probably
it's tough
a
to
little
call
better right now,
where the point is where you choose differently.
They're close. Yeah. Definitely, I don't know. That's such an interesting talking point, though. How many drops do you take in exchange for a guy that can get open like that?
Tony Pollard looked better. It's just literally everyone's like, well, it was against a really good defensive line,
we have
and Tony Pollard didn't rush that much. It's all Ezekiel Elliott looked good at was pass blocking, which that's really good that you have that talent, but you're paying a running back to run for the most part, and they paid their running back. They gave him a lot of money. It's just another excuse not to pay running backs. I think Pollard right now is probably better than Ezekiel Elliott. I'm just going to say that. I know it's one game, but it's already something I had thought going into the offseason where I was like, Pollard's going to be better than Ezekiel Elliott, likely by the end of the season. And I think that we're going to get there. I think we're going to get to the point where Pollard should probably be the starter going forward. But could be an overreaction. They didn't have Zach Martin, but now they're not going to have Leo Collins, so it's like a trade-off. I don't know. I still think it's tough.
And yet, I was going to say, Dallas clearly wasn't all that
and what's
interested
crazy
in running
is overall,
into that,
the Cowboys would have won that if their
physical
kicking
Tampa Bay
situation was
defensive
figured out.
front
They lost
either,
7
so
points to kicking.
I'd be willing to hold reservation for now, but in his limited snaps,
he
Pollard
used to be
was definitely
automatic.
more explosive.
He was
Elliott
with
had a
Justin
one-on-one
Tucker
situation
and
late in the game
Stephen
that would have been pretty important for him to break a tackle, but he
too.
couldn't
But
do it.
when they were all good, he was one of those guys. It's just apparently he can't do it anymore. He's not there.
What happened? What happened to that guy, Greg the Leg? What happened to him?
Yeah.
I'm looking over his stats. It looks like things really fell off a cliff for him his last year in Los Angeles.
I feel like yes, but it's probably because he attempts so many 50-yard plus field goals. I felt like he was Greg the leg because he had such a powerful leg.
And then last year rebounded a bit, but his career kicking percentage is only just under 82%, which seems kind of low for a guy like him. Hasn't he been to like 3 Pro Bowls? That's a good point, yeah. So, all right, well, why don't we get into the game that we're going to be paying most attention to, which is in Orchard Park. The Buffalo Bills, coming off an AFC Championship game appearance, have beaten the Steelers the last 2 years, in each of the last 2 years, I mean to say. And even though the Steelers had won every game from 99 or 2000 up until 2019, the Bills have come away with two relatively close victories in each of the last 2 seasons. As far as the total history between these two teams, it's generally been dominated by Pittsburgh, meeting 3 times in the playoffs in their histories. But in each of the last 2 seasons, those 2 Buffalo Bills-Steelers games, the Steelers had their second worst offensive output of the season in terms of yards. 2 years ago, the Steelers were held to 229 total yards, and last year they were held to 224 yards. So both times failing to crack 250 total yards. Not boding well for the offense this week, but it is a new offensive system, Austin. I figured that would be a good place to kind of get into things here when talking about this Pittsburgh Steelers 2021 season. A lot's going to be focused on what is different with the offense, because last year they faded down the stretch after developing this quick passing game.
I want to see some play action just occasionally
going
the
deep
offense,
and not finding
which I
much
think
success.
We'll see a little bit more.
Running
Maybe
the ball
not
well to start the
as
season,
much as I would hope, but I want to see play action actually used, because
stopped having
it's been proven
success
time
down
and time
the
again
field.
You don't need to
They
actually
weren't
even
running the
have
ball
a good
well at
running
all,
game
and
for play
things fell
action to be
apart.
effective. So I want to
with
see
all
it
eyes
used a
on
little
this
bit more
offense, what are you kind of looking
to
for?
kind of free up some passes deeper down the field. I want to see passes deeper down the field. That being said, because you have 3 capable wide receivers, and you should be using Juju Smith-Schuster like one, opposed to last year where he was used like a glorified running back or tight end, even shorter than a tight end. And then also, I want to see motion. All this talk about using more motion. I want to see it actually come into fruition, to see what the defense is running, be able to get some clues prior to the snap, stuff like that. Stuff that'll help the Steelers offense overall if they just do more. And I think that the play action, the motion is what it's going to boil down to, helping the Steelers offense improve the most this year. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And we saw a little, but almost in some ways a lot from that preseason game against the Lions, where it seemed like the Steelers were using a bunch of motion. There was some play action, and when we're talking play action, we're talking mostly from under center. At least I'm assuming that's what you mean. Okay, so obviously the big concern with this offense, and you can tell me if you disagree, Austin, but I think I'm not going out on a limb by saying that the offensive line is the biggest question mark with this team. All 5 regular starters from last season's group, Pouncey, DeCastro, Stefan Wisniewski, although DeCastro was out and Stefan Wisniewski played, but obviously DeCastro would have played that game if he were healthy. And Matt Filer and Zach Banner and Alejandro Villanueva, all of those guys are gone. The only guy that's still on the team is Zach Banner. Banner is currently on injured reserve. So you've got a collection of new players, and as we know with the offensive line, it's something that typically takes time for them to gel and play well. And I think that this defensive line, this defensive front of Buffalo, will provide a pretty good test, just from the standpoint of they aren't a deadly, elite pass rushing group, but they have ways of generating pressure. They just happen to come from a bunch of different guys and not one singular dominant guy. The only guy who seems to provide consistent pressure on that team is Jerry Hughes, and I think he's like 33 years old now. So this group runs like 8 deep, but none of them are really spectacular. So I'm pretty interested to see how that all turns out. If the Steelers can be just adequate in terms of pass protection, I'll feel good. But I do have questions about how the Steelers can protect that offensive line, which kind of brings into focus what Austin was talking about with that motion.
I think that's fair too.
Play
I mean,
action
starting
from
two
under center.
rookies
There
on
are
your
ways
offensive
the Steelers
line.
can
It's
help
tough. It's
their
not ideal, and
young
it's not even what the
offensive
Steelers
line
wanted to do.
with
Obviously,
chipping, with
Dan
play
Moore was
action,
not supposed to be a day one starter.
diverting extra blockers,
but
keeping
here
extra
we are,
in.
and
So there are ways to keep the quarterback protected.
So it's going to be interesting.
I still have my concerns.
It's going to be good to find out how these guys can handle a not the greatest pass rush, but like just kind of. I feel like you could call the Bills' defensive line like average. Like they got some guys, but like I feel like they're all just kind of like average. Like you said, there's no one that stands out. They usually will get pressure from other places. They got the Jerry Hughes, Ed Oliver. They're not going to be starting Star Lutulele in this game because he is out. They have Mario Addison on the other edge, which honestly, if he could return to his Panthers form, could be good. But he didn't really show much in Buffalo last year, not like what he did with the Panthers anyway. But yeah, so I feel like this is a good opening game to see where your offensive line is at. Because we also have to bank on Trey Turner returning back to form, because Trey Turner hasn't really been good for a couple of years now. Like he's had a really, really tough time, especially like according to PFF. PFF hasn't graded him very nicely at all. So it's going to be a learning experience to see where the offensive line is actually at, because we're banking on kind of a lot of things. We're banking on Kendrick Green being solid. We're banking on Trey Turner returning to form. We're banking on Chukwuma Okorafor being okay in the right tackle spot when he's been practicing at left tackle this entire preseason, because that's his more natural spot. Just this is going to be a good gauge of where the offensive line is at after this game. If they really struggle, there's going to be a lot of concerns going forward.
Yeah, Turner was actually I actually think he was the single worst offensive guard last year graded by PFF. So, I mean, big questions and concerns when it comes to that Steelers offensive line. I mean, I know that we've talked mostly about the passing game, but, I mean, how can we sit here and not say that the running game is going to be critically important too? I mean, this is a team that set out all offseason to try and improve the ground game, and they drafted a running back in the first round. They have I guess he's not technically a new voice because Adrian Clem was on the team as an assistant offensive line coach a year ago, but he has instilled a new physicality rules type of mindset in this offensive line. I just think that
it's just
it's something that takes a lot of time to build,
like that
and it's something that I think that they can be
every single
adequate.
Guy has something
but
that
I'd be
there's something to
if
be
you're
concerned
expecting
about
a
with
great
them
performance
starting.
from this offensive line,
there is a situation where they all do play
you're really
perfectly,
a high
but
stakes
like
gambler
it's just
you
very,
need a
very
bunch
unlikely.
Of things to go right, and
it's a tough sell.
Happen.
Every team has a weak point, and this might end up being the Steelers. So I'm hoping for the best, but yeah, with the run game focus that we went into the offseason with, I'm hoping at least improve there, because you couldn't really get worse run blocking wise from last year. So literally they changed everything. So I think that we'll at least possibly get a little bit better run blocking, maybe. It's really tough to get worse than last year in terms of that. So that's the only thing that I'm kind of hoping for. I'm hoping that we can establish a run game and we can just run on them a little bit more effectively than we did in the Bills game last year, for example.
I'd like to also mention, because I forgot to at the start of the show, we had a guest I spoke with Justin Maybach, a frequent guest of the show the last couple seasons. Talked with him a little bit about this preview game with the Buffalo Bills. And one of the things we touched on was the fact that Star Lotulelei was not going to be playing, that he had been ruled out. And Justin talked a little bit about the Bills and how they were susceptible against the run last season. They were the lightest defense, middle of the defense in the NFL last season. And he told me that it was adequate to say, or acceptable to say, that Ed Oliver has been,
he got comped to Aaron Donald because of how athletic he was as a defensive tackle. And obviously, no one's like Aaron Donald, but if he can take his intangibles and just put it with some skill, and he's going to be nasty. He's going to be as close to Aaron Donald as you could get if he takes that step. So no, that's completely fair. He doesn't train with knives. He doesn't live in the danger. He's got to be under pressure.
It's because he doesn't train with knives enough. I like the Steelers receivers against Buffalo's secondary. It is a pretty good secondary, but I'm thinking mostly the Steelers' depth will win out here. Teron Johnson and Levi Wallace still hanging on.
It's like
to
half and half, because half of their
spots, but
secondary is like really good. Like I'd say Jordan Poyer is really good. So Tre'Davious White is obviously very good. Micah Hyde, I feel like
Tre'Davious White.
I felt like he was better when he was younger in his career, but like he's still really solid. I think he's really good. And then you kind of got like Levi Wallace, who is someone that I like, but like he's not the greatest. And then you got Teron Johnson. So I think that I do still like the Steelers wide receivers like you in this matchup. I mean, the safeties are pretty solid, and targeting Tre'Davious White is usually not a good thing. But you have two other capable wide receivers. I don't know who Tre'Davious White would particularly match up on in this matchup. I guess it depends on the offense the Steelers are running with. I feel like he'd probably be on. In my gut says Claypool. But just because I think that Claypool's intangibles are a mismatch for most of the other cornerbacks. But, I mean, if he's on Claypool, that leaves Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster on Teron Johnson, and Levi Wallace. So I like those odds. I like that bet. I think that Najee should be contributing a lot. I feel like he's not going to come off the field
finally,
much in
let's
this game.
talk a little bit about the tight ends and the
I say it, I'll hammer it home all the
back.
time. If you're drafting a running back in the first round, he better be an every down back. I don't want to see Najee come off the field unless he's injured or needs like a breath. Like I have high expectations. He might not be great. He might not be effective, depending on how the offensive line blocks. But I hope to see him featured almost the entire day on offense. As for tight end, I'm not sure. Ebron and Freiermuth are listed as co-starters, so I assume that they'll rotate. That means, and I think that on more blocking routes, they'll probably elect for Freiermuth more than Ebron. I want to say I don't know if Freiermuth's much better than Ebron though in the blocking department quite yet, but I'll expect them to rotate. I won't be surprised if Freiermuth doesn't get a catch in this game yet, though. I think that he might get his first catch maybe later.
I don't think that I'll be as blunt as I can. I don't think the Steelers are going to be able to win this game without some explosive plays down the field in the passing game. Ben Roethlisberger last year against Buffalo had a tough game and a very low average depth of target. And I think that one of the big parts of this offense is supposed to be getting the ball down the field a little bit more on these longer developing plays, which also plays into my concern of the offensive line. could you see I guess what I'm wondering is, could you see a scenario where Ben gets sacked?
I think that if they really feel like the offensive line is getting destroyed in the pass blocking department, I feel like it's possible. But you might have to play that way if that's what the game commands. Like, I don't know if they'll be throwing away the offense, but more like just taking a
second and long runs. We see too many things that we saw last year.
Playing the way the game is dictating you to play, and if the pass rush is coming too fast, you kind of do have to go to that like faster out. I don't know if it would like destroy the offense or going forward, and if they'd stick with that, but I feel like it is possible that they do that.
On the other side, obviously Josh Allen coming off a MVP caliber season. The Buffalo Bills
offense
went to the AFC Championship game.
Crazy. Like
last year,
than
their
like their
defense
running
fell
backs,
off after having two really good seasons in 2018 and 2019.
They have a really
solid we see a
offense.
Return
Even
their
offensive line is solid. They got
and,
some really solid wide receivers.
As far as the Bills' offense goes, it's got to be one of the best.
And Gabe Davis is an up and coming guy. I like what they have going on. I think that with Josh Allen, if he continues playing the way he did, he could go on for an MVP campaign this year. He was close last year. Aaron Rodgers just played a little bit better. But I like what they got going on the offense for them. For our defense, it's going to be tough. We have a lot of new starters coming in there as well. Joe Schobert's in there, which he has experience, so I'm not really worried about him. Not with the Steelers, but he's been a starter for a while. James Pierre is a guy that I'm a little bit worried about. I feel like James Pierre might be lined up on Stefan Diggs because of Joe Hayden not being as fast. Diggs is not traditionally like a speedster like a Tyreek Hill, but like it's still, I feel like if he's your outside cornerback, Pierre, I feel like he's going to be the guy lined up on him if Sutton's on the inside. So I'm a little bit worried for him going into this game because that's just a tough matchup. He's not yet. We don't know what James Pierre. Yeah, I can't say that he's going to be better than Joe Hayden because he hasn't played at all. Like I literally, James Pierre could, after this entire preseason, just suck. It could just be like that. It could just been a preseason thing. We don't know. So that's got me a little bit worried. But other than
he's barely played.
Other than that, I feel decent. I guess I'm prepared for the linebackers on wide receivers, especially slot receivers. So I'm just preparing myself for that because they have 6 linebackers, I think, for that reason, just so they could have more linebackers on wide receivers. So, yeah.
The Steelers haven't been flipping their coverages lately, so it'll end up being wherever the Bills probably want to put Stefan Diggs. And the last couple of years, Steven Nelson was on him a lot and was okay at times, but also had some of his worst performances in a Steelers uniform against Buffalo. Diggs is a guy, or sorry, I said 2 years ago. I meant that Steven Nelson had a rough game 2 years ago, and then last year against Stefan Diggs, he really struggled in the second half. Diggs is a guy that can go off at any moment, and he's going to get his. It's hard to shut out a guy like that. So I'd be shocked if the Steelers held him to less than like 7 catches for 80 yards. That's a good day if you can manage to do that. What you really want to do is prevent the explosive plays, and he had a couple last season. You just need to keep him in front of you and not let him break tackles. And as far as the other receivers go, the Bills have, like you said, a talented receiving core with Emmanuel Sanders and Gabriel Davis and Cole Beasley. The slot receivers, I think, are the place to watch, which, Austin, you already said. The way the Steelers love to throw their linebackers out there. Definitely a concern. And, so it's going to be tough for the secondary, especially because there's just a bunch of question marks with a guy like James Pierre. How will Cam Sutton handle his first major duties on the outside? Will he even play outside that much because the Bills like to spread things out? And make no mistake about it, the Bills are probably going to be spreading and throwing about 70% of the time. if they want to run, they'll run Josh Allen, and occasionally we'll run Zach Moss and Devin Singletary.
Yeah, they really struggle. The Bills really threatened to break the
I think the key, if it's not in the secondary, obviously the place you're looking is the defensive front.
It's tough.
And
I'm a little worried
one
about
spot
the
where
pass
I feel
rush.
the Steelers have a
no
pretty
Stefan
good advantage.
Tuitt,
But again, the last
TJ
two
Watt
seasons,
only
the
starting
Steelers
to
have had
practice
just
with the
one
team
sack
for a week.
each
Melvin
against the
Ingram
Bills.
with a slight groin injury. Not Melvin Ingram. I apologize. Alex Highsmith with a slight groin injury. It doesn't make me feel good. Like, I don't think that. I feel like the pass rush is going to really start slow in this game. I feel like we're going to see probably another one-sack game. And it might not just be because we're facing the Bills. It might be because I think it's more
Alex
of that
Highsmith.
This is week 1 and this is an unfortunate matchup for week 1 because I think the pass rush will bounce back probably for week 2. But I have a bad feeling that the pass rush is going to be really slow in this game.
Yeah, I just think the way the Steelers pressure the quarterback in terms of blitzing, last year they had a very high blitz rate. I'd be expecting that again. So I still think they'll be able to get pressure and make Josh Allen's day difficult. One thing to note about Allen is that even though he's been sacked just twice in the last 2 years against Pittsburgh, he's still been pressured quite a bit. So he hasn't had his best games against Pittsburgh the last 2 years either. This is where the Steelers have to take advantage. They have to be able to force, I think, at least 2 turnovers.
Tyler Matakevich revenge game. Not for another time he was on the team last year, but he gets revenge game. Ray McLeod, Tyler Matakevich revenge game part 2. Let's freaking go.
Teams related, something that's on your mind.
I forgot about Ray McLeod being a Bill. I always think of him as a Panther.
I was going to say, so is Ray McLeod, if you want to look at it that way. I only remember him in Buffalo just because I thought that was a wild name. But, all right, we are going to pause a moment and have our interview with Justin play. And we'll be back right on the other side to talk about what else is going on around the NFL, any final things about the Steelers and Bills game ahead of Week 1, and then we'll take our picks for the week, and then we'll talk. We'll give our last predictions for Steelers-Bills Week 1. Sound good, Austin? All right, we'll be right back on the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. We're being joined today by a frequent visitor in the past, Justin Maybach. Thanks again for joining us today, talking about Steelers and Bills ahead of Week 1 of the NFL season. How you doing, Justin?
Doing great. Looking forward to opening day. Can't believe football's finally back.
Yeah, and that long wait must have felt even longer for a lot of Bills fans this year, coming off of the most successful season in recent team memory, probably the better part of the last 20 years, Justin. What's been the pulse of the fan base in Buffalo as far as your understanding of things with the way last season went?
From my understanding, this is basically the most hyped up season for the fan base since probably the early 90s when they were making all those runs to the Super Bowl. And obviously I wasn't alive for that season, but the fact that we all anticipated them having a good season last year and yet nobody could go to the games until the playoffs and it was only a limited number of fans. The fact that the stadium is the fact that the stadium's going to be at full capacity this year is what's really exciting, and I'm so looking forward to being at the stadium for the game on Sunday. Obviously, I couldn't go to any games last year. Nobody could. So really looking forward to the atmosphere. It should be very loud.
Yes, it absolutely should. Real quickly, I wanted to ask you, do you know what the latest is with this new stadium talk? They're talking about Austin, Texas, I heard.
Well, Austin, Texas is more or less just a rumor to try and incentivize the county and the team to get working on the negotiations with the stadium. So I don't know where that even came from, but basically, I would like to believe that it's all just small talk, and a bunch of teams obviously have relocation rumors go up all the time when there's a new stadium that needs to be built for the team to be viable in a specific market. But the recent talks have been about a $1.4 billion stadium that would be across from the current stadium in Orchard Park, literally across the road, taking over space that's now occupied by parking lots for the current stadium. So if that gets agreed upon within the next few months or the next year, I'd imagine, because the lease expires after the 2022 season, and what would happen is they would have to work on a new lease that could be extended until the new stadium is built, and then probably get a lease worked out for the new stadium when that is built. If they can figure that out within the next year or so, I have no idea. It's a long process, and they're looking at an open-air stadium with a roof to cover most of the seating, kind of like Seattle's stadium, Lumen Field, I believe it's now called, and it would seat about 62,000 fans. It would be probably one of the smallest stadiums in the NFL, taking down the capacity of what's now Highmark Stadium by about 12,000 seats, from what I was hearing. And ideally, if it creates a good home advantage for the Bills, and even though the idea of having a retractable roof means they could have more events at that stadium, I think that the idea of an outdoor stadium built like Seattle's could be really good for the team, securing long-term viability in Western New York. And I hope it gets done, because even though I don't live in Buffalo anymore, it would be nice to see the team stay there, since the Bills just don't feel right outside of Buffalo, and to envision them going to Austin, Texas, out of all cities, just doesn't feel right.
All right, thank you for adding all that, Justin. I appreciate all that information. Yes, would love to see football stay in the Western New York area for a lot of reasons. I think it's a great market, so hopefully that'll all get hammered out. It sounds like it's, like you said, it's more just a ploy. So let's get back to the center of attention, which is the game on Sunday. Let's start with Josh Allen, a guy that maybe wasn't the most polished passer coming out of Wyoming in the draft several years ago. Had an inconsistent rookie year, got a little bit better his second year, and then took off last season into an MVP caliber season that saw him really outshine just by pretty much Aaron Rodgers and maybe Patrick Mahomes. He was legitimately a top 5, even top 3 quarterback last season. Do you expect his play to continue, and how do you think the team feels about him right now?
I think this team is definitely buying into all of the hype with Allen. Obviously, he just recently signed a massive extension within the last month, and I believe that he's going to make the Bills a legitimate contender for years to come. As far as 2021 is concerned, I can't necessarily say it's going to be as good as 2020 at the moment. I'd be satisfied with him staying around that level, maybe his numbers dipping just a little bit, not necessarily going all the way back down to his 2019 form, because even though the Bills were winning a bunch of games that year, it wasn't always easy for Allen in the offense. And I think that this year Allen has the capability of putting up very similar numbers. If there is a bigger decline, there would be cause for concern, but at the same time, I believe there's a dip to be expected. So far, I can't necessarily see a huge dip based on what I've seen in the preseason from that game he played against the Packers, even though it was against their backup defense. The fact that reports from practice have been saying that he looked good, the fact that they went out and got Emmanuel Sanders to replace John Brown and otherwise have returned every single starter for the most part on offense, it gives me confidence that he'll have another really good season, and it's understandable that he's a popular pick for MVP. And having seen a bunch of quarterbacks that were mediocre at best for a majority of the Bills' playoff drought, it's just surreal to see Allen leading the league as far as MVP consideration, even jersey sales, from what I just noticed yesterday.
Last season, the Buffalo Bills' weakness, if you could call it a weakness, is the fact that their running game didn't have outstanding numbers outside of Josh Allen's 400 yards rushing. A two-back system with Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. Are you expecting more out of this group, or do you think that they're going to keep it pass-heavy, Josh Allen 30 or 70% of the time, dropping back to pass, so just running 30% of the time as opposed?
I would say that it's going to stay a very pass-happy offense, as the offensive coordinator that they've had the last 3 seasons, Brian Daboll, is still there in Buffalo. And also, they went out and picked up Matt Breida from Miami in the offseason, so it's not just Singletary and Moss anymore in their backfield. He's more or less the replacement for TJ Yeldon, who was seldom used, but I'm wondering if Breida is going to end up surpassing Singletary and Moss on the depth chart at any point, because Breida didn't get utilized as properly in Miami, but had some flashes occasionally with the San Francisco 49ers while he was there. I'd say if the ground game can improve from what it was the last couple years, then I'd be very happy, so that way it's not all about just Allen scrambling if a play breaks down and making up a majority of the offense as far as the rushing attack is concerned, and it seems to have gotten away from that. They also have Reggie Gilliam, who's listed as a fullback, but he also seems to be more of a receiving threat at times. And then even though Tywan Jones is listed as a running back, he's mainly used on special teams, so I can't imagine to see him in the backfield unless there's a wave of injuries left and right at some point during the year. But as far as running back depth goes, I don't think the Bills really improved too mightily in the offseason. I think they're just counting on development from Singletary and Moss, with Singletary entering year 3, Moss entering year 2, Breida having that veteran experience to guide them. And that's my overall thought on the rushing attack.
The offensive line, maybe not the most outstanding star-studded group of linemen, but they've got a good body of work, and they're bringing back all the starters, right?
Yes, the only starter on offensive line, to my knowledge, who wasn't in the game last year against Pittsburgh because it was late in the year, he was gone for the year by that point, was Cody Ford, who I believe is entering year 3. Otherwise, they have returned everybody: John Feliciano, Mitch Morris, Darrell Williams, and Deion Dawkins. Their depth also includes Ryan Bates, Ike Butker, and then a couple of rookie tackles in Spencer Brown and Tommy Doyle. I'm not sure how often we'll see them worked in on Sunday, if at all, but I wouldn't be surprised to see the line having another decent year. It's not the league's best in a way, but it does look like they are coming into this matchup with more experience than the Steelers' offensive line, as I noticed that in the offseason there were definitely some changes with Pouncey and DeCastro gone and Trey Turner coming in. Hopefully the offensive line for the Steelers figures out the kinks within the first few weeks, because even after this matchup, I think that there's a couple very winnable games down the stretch heading into the rest of the month of September and then into October as well.
Really quick one to get to Stefan Diggs, the electric receiver for the Bills. Last year had a quiet first half against Pittsburgh and then really exploded in the second half and put up some fantastic numbers. One of the best receivers in the NFL. What do you think he can do against a tough Pittsburgh defense this week?
Now, I wouldn't be surprised if the game starts out slow for him like it did last year, because the Steelers' defense is going to likely be one of the better defenses that the Bills see within the first few weeks of the season, if not all year. I would not be surprised to see him go off for, I'd say, 7 receptions for 125 yards at least, and maybe a touchdown, kind of like last year. But I would not be surprised to see some double coverage on Diggs. Of course, if the Steelers were to double cover him, then Emmanuel Sanders, who may or may not play, listed as questionable for now. I would think he'll play, but Sanders and Cole Beasley, and then also Gabe Davis, serve as receiving threats in this case if Diggs isn't able to make an impact. But as we saw late last year, whenever Allen threw to Diggs, it did become a problem. So I think Diggs can certainly make a huge impact. I wouldn't expect him necessarily to get into the end zone if he scores more than once, because Allen usually likes to spread out the ball amongst his arsenal of weapons. But I would not be surprised to see Diggs have another productive day, since he is among one of the league's best wide receivers.
Do you think the Bills' offensive line is going to have any trouble with the Steelers' pass rush, and therefore do you think Josh Allen might have a tougher time in this game? Do you think he might on an average week?
I would say it varies, because last year that was a concern I had heading into the matchup, and the pass rush did seem to play a role in at least slowing down the Bills' offense in the first half until they could finally figure out how to get past the defense later on. What I will say is that having T.J. Watt for the Steelers definitely helps out, and I had a feeling he was going to play. I had a feeling that his new contract extension was coming eventually, no matter what. But I think that with Watt and the other guys on the defense that are returning for the Steelers, it could be a long day for Allen if the line isn't ready to go. But I also believe that Allen is also good with his presence of mind to protect the football and escape the pocket when it collapses. So it could be tough. I do believe they only got to Allen for a sack once last year, maybe twice, if I remember correctly. And
once each of the last two seasons in both of those games.
Thank you for that little tidbit. So I would say that it could be a very tough game at times for Allen. I mean, what I noticed is that against some of the better edge rushers in the game, such as Joey Bosa and Aaron Donald, like there can be a point in the game where the line fails to protect Allen and they can disrupt the play. I would be afraid of Allen getting hurt so early in the year, per se, but I also think that with how good of a job the Bills did the last couple years against the Steelers specifically, that I don't think it becomes too much of an issue. Although, if there was a point in the game where I think the Steelers start to get to Allen a bit, it's probably around the beginning of the second half, sometime in the third quarter. That's usually been a time when the Bills' offense seems to take a dip in production that I've noticed in the last couple of years. Of course, this is a brand new year. It's a brand new season. We don't know how anything's going to go. So based on the last couple years, based on the last couple matchups, I think Watt will definitely be productive, along with other guys on that defensive front for Pittsburgh, which is obviously well known for blitzing a good amount of the time.
On the other side, the Bills had the lightest defensive line in the league last year and had a little bit of trouble stopping the run. They beefed up a little bit. They got Star Lutulele back. However, according to head coach Sean McDermott, Lutulele will not practice today and he will not play Sunday against the Steelers, as reported by WGR 550 in Buffalo. So without him, do you have any massive concerns about the middle of the Bills' defense?
I would say that it's still a work in progress, and I'm not sure how much of an impact I'll see on Sunday necessarily. I will say that having Jerry Hughes back for what it would be his 10th year with the Bills, at least his 9th year. Having Jerry Hughes back is awesome as always. They are working on developing that. They have Mario Addison returning, who was brought in last year, Vernon Butler as well. AJ Epinesa is entering his 2nd year, and he's more of a project in a sense, along with newly drafted Boogie Basham and Gregory Rousseau. But from what I've heard, Rousseau has made a really good name for himself in training camp this year. Don't know how much of an impact he makes all the time as a rookie, but that was definitely an area that the Bills wanted to address in the draft, considering how it was noticeable that getting to the quarterback became an issue, especially in the AFC Championship game this past season against Kansas City. So not having Lutulele will hurt for a bit of games, and I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't necessarily the only game he misses all year. But I would not be surprised if the Bills' defense stands their ground. They've been a bend but don't break Harris starts his Steelers career out with some explosive runs here and there, but I would think that the defense is capable of buckling down when the offense for the Steelers is capable of reaching the red zone at times.
So Ed Oliver entering his third season, I wouldn't know that I don't think I'd call him disappointing, but would it be accurate to say that he's been a little underwhelming so far?
I would agree, considering he was a top 10 draft pick coming off of a year in which the Bills basically had to endure a rebuild, and it was a rough year, mainly because there was such high turnover at quarterback, and the defense at times couldn't hold their ground. So, as I was saying, and thank you for bringing up Ed Oliver, a name I forgot to mention, the defensive line has been a work in progress every year in the draft for the last few years, and I wouldn't have been surprised to see some more production last year, especially with because last year obviously they didn't have Star Lele due to the COVID opt-out, but the fact that it seems to be a reoccurring issue makes me wonder what is it going to take for the Bills to finally have dominant pressure when it comes to a dominant player or two when it comes to the trenches every so often during the game. I would have been really happy if they had tried to land J.J. Watt, and I think they did come close to getting Watt, like having even just a veteran guy there. Obviously, his production isn't what it used to be, but he signed with Arizona, so maybe the Bills just feel like over time they're going to hit on somebody that will pay off big time.
The middle of the defense has a couple candidates for breaking out in a big way. I'm thinking mainly Tremaine Edmonds. He and Matt Milano formed a pretty good linebacker tandem, but I also sense the idea that people feel like Edmonds can give a little more.
Yeah, I would agree, but at the same time, Tremaine Edmonds is very, very young, and is, believe it or not, entering his fourth NFL season at the age of 23. So definitely broke into the league much younger than a lot of young linebackers. And I would say that for him to have a bounce back here, considering where his 2020 season was, would be excellent to see, considering, like Ed Oliver, he also was a highly touted first-round draft pick. Believe it or not, the first pick the Bills had immediately after Allen at pick number 7. I believe he was pick number 15 or 16 in 2018. And they also have A.J. Klein to serve as a linebacker who was in his second season with the Bills. Matt Milano obviously got a very good extension with the Bills this past offseason. A lot of fans assumed he was going to be gone. And last year, Milano actually was such a huge impact on the roster that the Bills only lost one game that Milano had played in all year, and that was the AFC title game loss. So he's a force to be reckoned with. They have former Steeler Tyler Medikevich, primarily used on special teams, but I guess could fill in as a linebacker if need be. So it's not I wouldn't say it's the best in the league, but it's definitely underrated and undervalued as a unit, the linebacker core. So can't wait to see what they're capable of this year.
I like the Bills' back end, Justin. I think they've got a good safety tandem with Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. I also am a huge fan of Tre'Davious White, but I still think that there's a bit of a question with the number 2 and 3 cornerbacks, Teron Johnson and Levi Wallace. It seems like the Bills have been looking to upgrade their depth cornerback group lately.
I would agree on that, and every year I feel like that's definitely an area that the front office looks at, but it seems like no one's truly capable of being able to take Levi Wallace's job away from him as the number 2 corner opposite Tre'Davious White. They also have Saron Neal to fill in on occasion, and the safety tandem of Poyer and Hyde, as usual, has been very reliable on that Bills defense, both coming in the same year, 2017. They recently picked up DeMar Hamlin in the draft, so not sure what kind of role he plays. They have Dane Jackson as another depth piece, former Panther, So not sure if there's something that the Bills like with the Panthers defense. Ironic, coming from Pittsburgh, but it's a strong backfield. Kind of took a dip last year, but I feel like that was also because teams had to go more pass heavy on them late in games because they were trailing, because the Bills' offense emerged from being mediocre or outright at times to being among the best offenses in the league, mainly in part due to the rise of Allen, the addition of Diggs, and several other factors.
What part of the Steelers' offense would concern you most if you were the Bills' defensive coordinator?
I would say the fact that this year they do come in with a plan to run more often than pass, unlike the meeting last year in December, because Najee Harris, as long as he can work around the blocks that his lineman provides, can be a force to be reckoned with. And I would also say that the receivers will probably not necessarily be dropping as many passes as they were around the time that the Steelers started to fall off late last year. It varies, but I would say more or less just with it being week one, with the Steelers not necessarily in a late season slump, the fact that the Steelers seem to come out a little bit stronger than late in the year at the beginning of the year, which is an odd time for this matchup based on recent meetings. It seems like these teams have always played each other late when stakes are high. So for this to be a week one matchup, the Steelers, I think, will be stronger. Ben obviously is in better shape than he's ever been from what I've been hearing. and the new offense could be something that gives the Bills defense different looks from what they saw last year. So I'd say the passing attack with Claypool, Smith-Schuster, and Deontay Johnson could be a problem at times. But like I said, the defense for the Bills tends to be a bend but don't break unit. They may find out a solution at times, especially when the Steelers' offense gets deep in the red zone. So to hold them to 3 points as opposed to 7 would be a plus every time. But I don't know. It's a very intriguing matchup because it's a very intriguing matchup because while the Bills are favored to win and a lot of people could see them winning, the Steelers won't make it easy. It shouldn't be just a blowout. I mean, if it is, I wouldn't be surprised because of how dominant the Bills were at the end of last season and how that momentum can carry into this year. But games between these two teams have been close, and I think the Steelers' offense, while not as strong as it used to be back when they had Le'Veon Bell and AD, could still make times in the game tough for the Bills' defense.
So how exactly do you see this game going? Do you have any one matchup or player you're planning on watching closely? And how do you see this game breaking down?
I would say that it would probably come down to how the Steelers' defense handles Stefan Diggs, like you had brought up earlier in our discussion. I think that that's a very critical matchup to determining how the game goes. Last year, it took Diggs a while to get going, so it'll be interesting early on to see what Allen does as far as receiving options are concerned, whether or not he continuously tries to go Diggs' way, or if he finds Beasley and Davis and Isaiah McKenzie, another receiving option, frequently. It would be interesting to see how the Bills' run defense prepares for Najee Harris in his first ever professional football game. So those are, if I had to pick the more intriguing matchup, I would say it's definitely Diggs versus the Steelers secondary. But how the Bills' run defense handles Najee Harris and the other backs would be intriguing as well, second most intriguing.
Do you have a final score?
I would go with the Bills winning probably by a score of 22-18. I don't know why that score, but I like to have a little fun sometimes thinking of new scores that could come up, because I don't know if that's even been an NFL score that's been accomplished, but just an idea of it being low scoring, because the last two games have primarily been low-scoring contests. With it being week one, offense may or may not be at a premium. Like, I don't expect it to necessarily be a shootout, since games between these two teams have actually been based on strong defense. I would not expect that to change necessarily, although I could also see it going the opposite. Defenses not being prepared to tackle, it could turn into a shootout. With the weather being nice, offense seems to be up around the entire league in September. I would say, 22-18, maybe 22-20 to be more realistic. Maybe it comes down to a late field goal putting the game out of reach. I don't know, but to see the Steelers win, it would be huge for them, considering how this is probably one of their toughest matchups of the year until late in the year when they have a really rough stretch to end the season. It's been a nice, underrated AFC rivalry as of lately, and they almost could have met in the playoffs last season. It was supposed to happen. Obviously, then the Browns-Steelers wild card game happened, and I'm interested to see what would have happened if that was a playoff matchup. Maybe if the Steelers sneak in as a wild card, the teams meet again in January, which I'd look forward to. But I think it should be a fun game overall. Fans are back in the stands at full capacity. I'm looking forward to a really good game.
To answer your question, 22-18, which is the one that you had originally predicted, that is Scorigami. You are a fan of Scorigami, right? It's never been done.
Yep. I believe that there's going to be plenty more games that end in Scorigami this year. And I don't know. So to have a more realistic score, I'd say 23-20 actually, not 22-20. I don't know. Just throwing random numbers out there.
You think it'll be a competitive game, but Buffalo has I would be surprised if Pittsburgh won. Is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, it's in a way not like it's a matchup that I think Buffalo can't. I don't want to say they can't afford to lose. Their schedule to start the year isn't as strong as it will be late in the year. Although there are some matchups that I think if the Bills aren't prepared for necessarily. So after Pittsburgh, they play on the road against Miami, then come home to face Washington and Houston. The Houston game, I'm not thinking will be that tough of a matchup at all. But it's a schedule to start out the year that the Bills should be 3-1 or 4-0 through those four games, because then after that they have to go to Kansas City and then Tennessee for two big primetime games that will really show the fan base and the nation as a whole how they match up against the league's elite this year. Although they are technically among the league's elite in that category. So I think it's a game, like I said, that the Bills should win. If they were to lose, it puts more pressure on them to have to win the next three. I don't think they're going to lose, but the Steelers also are an underrated. They're always a team you never want to just overlook. Of course, sometimes Steelers have been guilty of that too, but I don't know. Should be a very entertaining matchup. We're really looking forward to being at Highmark Stadium for the first game of the year.
Expectations certainly high in Buffalo for the first time in a long time. Justin, appreciate you joining me today and talking Bills and Steelers, and hope you enjoy the game on Sunday. We really appreciate you coming on, and that'll be it for now. Enjoy the game, everybody. Alrighty, and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Austin, Davidson back with me, John Kier, talking Steelers and Bills. We just had Justin May back on, talking about the Bills' perspective of things going into this week's game. I wanted to ask you real quickly what you think about that whole new stadium situation in Orchard Park right now.
I think it's a little crazy that the billionaire is saying, I'm going to pay zero, but it's just a business tactic. I do think it's disrespectful to say, I'm going to put zero of the bill as the first tactic. He should have, at least said, 5%. He's going to end up coming up and spending, 40% and have the rest of New York spend the 60%. But, like, I don't know. It seems so disrespectful that he's like, yeah, I'm going to foot none of the bill just to start there. I know it is a starting point, and it's probably going to get worked out, but yeah, I think it's just a little bit ridiculous, his standpoint. Like, this is his team, you know?
Yeah. What do you think about the Bills leaving what is now Highmark Stadium? I mean, you've been there now. You know what it's like. What do you think about the state of that stadium and them leaving it?
I liked the stadium when I went there. I actually it's probably a hot take, I liked Orchard Park better than MetLife. I don't like MetLife Stadium very much. But regardless, I thought it was fine. I know that they want to redo it and stuff, but I honestly think it was okay. But I think Bills fans do deserve like a newer stadium. I think that they're very loyal. And as from the team moving, there's just nowhere on the East Coast that makes sense. I literally went out of my way thinking about it, looking at all the places that they could possibly go, and my most favorite was Oklahoma. Like, literally, that is the best, because you could still have, like, the Oklahoma City Bills or something like that, where you could keep the name Bills and keep going. It kind of makes sense a little bit. And then also, it's an untapped NFL market where you could go in between Tulsa and Oklahoma State and play at one of those stadiums, and you're going to get
it's a massive
there
football market, at least for college, you know.
At least for college, and that's your best bet, because like I literally made a list of all the most populous cities in the United States that did not have an NFL team, and there was almost nothing on the East Coast, and the things that were on the East Coast were were mostly middle, like Oklahoma. Oklahoma was like the best I could get on the East, or it was like another team in Florida, or another team in Texas, another team, really California. California has so many populous cities, but another Ohio, absolutely not. Ohio does not need a third NFL team, like, because Columbus is in the top 50.
What about Toronto, given that they had that affiliation before?
Canada could be cool because it keeps like anyone that's in upstate New York can.
It's only like a 2 to 3 hour drive depending on where you are if you're near that area.
Yeah, I would also approve for Toronto for the fans that are actually like in New York and so they could actually still see their Bills play. Like if they move to Oklahoma, the fans that are in New York really can't watch them play anymore unless. Yeah, there's nothing. There's like unless they see, I don't know.
Unless if they're in New York.
Eagles?
It ruins the whole division layout. I think the point you're trying to get across, though, is that obviously it'd be best for them just to stay in Buffalo. And a lot of places where you could move in the East Coast, there's other teams nearby, so that other teams would not approve it either.
Yeah, it would just suck. Because, like, you can't even say, oh, well, at least when they play the Giants or Jets, that's like an 8-hour drive, 9-hour drive if you're in upstate New York to New Jersey. Like, that's not... It's not nice. That's not a good drive. Like,
it would be.
Yeah, you're likely closer to Philadelphia. Like, you'd have to wait for the Bills to play the Eagles.
You absolutely are. You're
think.
Closer. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Philly are all closer than both the New York teams.
And New England, probably, right?
I think New England's further, but
okay.
But everywhere, like those other places, like Pittsburgh is 4 hours, like 3.5, 4 hours away. Cleveland is like 2. It's not far from other places, but yeah, these New Jersey teams, I don't like calling them New York teams when they play in New Jersey. So, sorry. Getting away from the conversation, I will say one of the things about all these new stadiums that is kind of changing is that they seem to be more made for fan comfort and less about the actual noise and the atmosphere, which is something that I think a lot of these older stadiums like I know it as Ralph Wilson Stadium, but it's really Highmark Stadium. That's what I've known places like Highmark Stadium to be, is more geared towards the fan atmosphere and not so much the fan experience. And I think that's something that's being lost with all these new stadiums.
Yeah, it does suck. I mean, like, you look at Las Vegas's stadium and you look at the LA Rams stadium, and they're really cool. But you go to the game for, like, the fan experience, really. I guess comfort is... I can't say comfort is to be ignored, but, like, I don't know.
There's a difference now when they're making all these comfortable seats, whereas... I don't know if you sat in these... I don't think you sat in that area of Highmark Stadium, but there are places where there's actually just bleacher seats, and it's not that comfortable. But you can also bang on them, and it gets really loud. And It's something. Yeah, it's fun. I respect it, but I understand why a group of stadium constructors would want to go another way. I don't like the idea that it would be smaller, though.
Yeah, smaller sucks. It makes the price go up as well as that the fact that you're building a new.
Plus, it might take away from the atmosphere
stadium.
too. Justin said in the interview that they might try to do something with roof canopies, similar to the way Seattle does it, to try to get keep more noise in, which would be interesting. Because I think that's one of the great assets of the current Bills stadium is that it's loud. And speaking of loud, it's one of my biggest concerns for the offensive line is that there's going to be multiple penalties and they're going to have trouble hearing. And I think that that's going to lead to a lot of problems.
Yeah, the miscommunication caused by crowd atmosphere is not to be ignored. It's going to be tough for a new offensive line that's kind of only worked together for this preseason. This exact combination has gotten like no snaps together at all.
Not in its configuration. And you have to think when Banner was out, Moore went to right tackle, so it hasn't even been in its exact configuration ever until practice like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's tough. That is super tough. You have to learn the communication with your guys like on the fly, basically.
By the way, I think it was from Steelers Depot. The Steelers have, at least since the merger in 1970, have never had a rookie center or like two rookie offensive linemen starting in the season opener.
That is a shame. Yeah, it's scary. It's definitely not ideal. I don't think they want to be here, but again, this is the cards they were dealt, so just got to roll with it. There's a first time for everything, I suppose.
Time to throw the child in the water and see if it can swim.
Heck yeah.
All right. Let's move on here. You want to get to... Well, should we officially go over the injury report really quickly? I know we didn't do that earlier, but we kind of touched on a couple guys that were on there.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we kind of already said the two guys. So it's Alex Highsmith. He is questionable with a groin injury. He practiced in full on Friday, and Keith Butler was not worried about his availability so much. He said he's confident in him playing, so that should be good. And on the Bills side, it's Star Lutulele. He is out.
Is Emmanuel Sanders on there?
I didn't think that he got a designation.
I thought he was questionable. I could be wrong.
I have also been wrong before.
I'm checking right now. Week 1 injury reports. Game status. Yeah, he's questionable with a foot injury.
Okay.
So,
yeah, my bad.
Maybe we'll see more of Gabriel Davis this week then.
Yeah, maybe.
All right. Let's get to some stuff going on around the NFL. Namely, the poor Baltimore Ravens, Austin. What a tough run of luck that they've had this preseason. It sucked when they lost L.J. Fort early in the offseason. It was like, man, that sucks, They lost him, and then they just keep coming. They lost J.K. Dobbins to an ACL injury, then Justice Hill tore his Achilles, and then all of a sudden they keep coming. Gus Edwards, the guy who was supposed to replace J.K. Dobbins, goes down with an ACL. Marcus Peters is out for the season with an ACL. And they also just put their best blocking tight end, Nick Boyle, on injured reserve. And remember, there's no Hayden Hurst here, so it's basically just Mark Andrews manning the mantle right now. So Boyle is expected to return from injured reserve this season, but he's out at least the first 3 games. So the Ravens, after losing their top 3 running backs, one of their inside linebackers, and they also lost their top cornerback and their number 2 tight end. They've signed a host of different players, including probably the 3 best street free agent running backs in Le'Veon Bell, Devontae Freeman, and Latavius Murray to replace those injured running backs. Murray, I don't think, is going to be able to play in this game, correct? Because he just got signed to the practice squad yesterday, right?
Yeah, I don't think he's eligible. I don't think he's ready anyway. So I think it's just going to be Tyson Campbell and Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, so Tyson Campbell and Le'Veon Bell, maybe Devontae Freeman, but I don't think Freeman, right?
Freeman's like a long shot too. He was signed after Bell. I think he was signed like 2 days after or a day after.
So yeah, it could be just Tyson Williams and Lev Bell, which, wow. Obviously you'd expect Tyson Williams to get a lot of carries, but it's setting up for this season. I think Murray's clearly the best of those 3, so him and Tyson Williams I expect will get most of the work, but Bell and Freeman at least have experience, even if they're both probably washed. I think this is going to put a huge onus on Lamar Jackson for him to run more and just overall do more. So I think that he's gonna rush and throw probably more than he ever will in his entire career, I figure.
Yeah, this is a insane stretch of injuries for them. The other injuries we didn't mention is Rashad Bateman, who is on IR. And Miles Boykin, who is also on IR. They have just a bunch with their offense, and it's gonna be tough. And honestly though, if this was 2015, this would have been the coolest offense ever. It would have been the best rushing attack in history with Le'Veon Bell, Devontae Freeman, and Latavius Murray in their 2015 version. But it is not 2015. We are now in 2021. And it's just sadness. It's a factory of sadness. They don't have Orlando Brown anymore. They switched him out for Big Al, which wasn't a very good run blocker. It doesn't really help. It doesn't really fit their offense, I didn't feel like. Matt Skura is gone. They have a new center this year. It's just, I don't know. I predicted the Ravens not making the playoffs this year prior to the injuries. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but like
now you know.
They are not set for what they're built for. They are built as a run-first offense, and their team is destroyed on that regard. And because they were built that way, they don't have like the best wide receivers. Everything is going through Sammy Watkins and Mark Andrews in the passing game now. Like that's like all they got. Hollywood Brown is still there, but like I don't know. I'm not a big fan. I don't think he's very good.
He and Jackson don't mesh too well.
Yeah, like they don't go together well. And Jackson, I still say is not a very good passer. Like he's all right, he's serviceable, where his other abilities compensate for it, so you don't have to worry. I am worried that he's literally going to be forced to pass now because his running attack. There's no way it could be as effective as it was last year. Not with this group, not with this offensive line he has now. Instead, it's just and missing Nick Boyle, who's their best blocking tight end. They've got a lot of work. The Ravens, they have their work cut out.
And
for them.
I don't think you can expect him to carry it 15 or 20 times a game the entire season. I mean, maybe 15, but you start doing more than that, you're really pushing it. So this offense is definitely being nerfed.
Yeah, you're going to run him into the ground, and that was always my fear with Lamar Jackson. It's just going to be 1 year where all of him getting run into the ground is finally over. He can't run as much, he's not as fast, and then it's over for Lamar Jackson. His career is basically going to be over as soon as that happens.
All right, let's move on to other NFL news. Cowboys tackle La'el Collins has been suspended for 5 games due to a violation of the NFL's substance abuse policy. He reportedly missed several drug tests. He'll be eligible to return for the Week 6 game in New England. Just some housekeeping work there, but a tough loss for the Cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, they finally got their whole offensive line together, and just like that, now it's 6 weeks not together. Zach Martin didn't even get to play Week 1, so they didn't even get to be at full strength. And now, up until at least till Week 6, they will still not have their complete healthy offensive line, which sucks for them.
The Colts signed their running back Naeem Hinds to a new 3-year contract extension with an AAV of $6.2 million, making him shockingly a top 10 paid running back, the most for any non-starter in the league. He does have 170 catches over the course of the last 3 seasons and averages almost 15 yards a punt return, but I don't know about paying running backs.
If you're not going to, first of all, don't pay your starting running back. Second of all, do not pay your backup running back. They're like, but combined, Jonathan Taylor and Naeem Hinds only make $8 million, and that combines for an elite running back. And I'm like, great, congratulations. But consider this: what if you just went with Jonathan Taylor on his cheap running back contract, and as the Colts actually paid a really good free agent $6 million. $6 million could have gotten you something really nice in 2021 free agency. Like they could have went so many other places with that money, and they instead use it on their backup running back. I hate the Colts. I hate their brass. I don't hate the Colts as a team. Their brass is so frustratingly stupid, it hurts.
Oh, you mean the whole not spending, and then when they finally do, it's this?
Literally. They're like, we want to pay for good guys. We're not going to just get free agents on the street. Like, literally, they could have been a competitive team if they spent money this year. and they're like, no, we want to pay our internal guys, and then it still takes forever for them to pay their internal guys, and they still have like more than $20 million in cap space. Ridiculous. I would hate being a fan of that team. Literally would hate it.
A couple other bits of notes. The Washington football team placed Curtis Samuel on injured reserve with a groin injury. That's not expected to be season-ending. And the Jets receiver Jamison Crowder, still recovering from COVID-19, will miss Sunday's game against the Panthers.
I'm still just thinking about Naeem Hinds. I'm like, you could have gotten a Mike Hilton for that.
All right.
Literally.
To save poor Austin from that, we'll get into our Week 1 picks, which we already talked about the Thursday night game. Let's get going. All of our lines provided by ESPN. We've got the Atlanta Falcons hosting the Philadelphia Eagles. Atlanta is a 3.5-point favorite at home.
Give me the Eagles plus 3.5. I think the Eagles are going to win this game. I think they're a better team overall than the Falcons.
Give me the Falcons. I don't trust Jalen Hurts. I want to see what this new offense for the Falcons is going to look like with Arthur Smith, and I want to see what all they can do without a guy like Julio Jones in the lineup, but adding a guy like Kyle Pitts. I think the Falcons can win this one by a touchdown. Next, the Vikings at the Bengals. The Bengals are giving away 3 points at home. I'm kind of surprised, to be honest with you, that the line was like this.
I was also surprised. I thought the Vikings would have a little bit more. I am picking Minnesota to cover. I am putting all. If we were doing a lock of the week, this would have to be mine. I use this game as both my survivor picks. I picked the Vikings to beat the Bengals, and I think that it should be relatively easy. I do not trust the Bengals.
Why don't we do that? Why don't we make a lock of the week?
Sure. Then this is my lock of the week because I basically committed it to me being my lock of the week.
Okay. I will also do that then because in my 2 survivor pools, which we had talked about, one of them I picked the Vikings. All right. Let's move on to the next game, the 49ers at the Detroit Lions. The 49ers are getting 8 points on the road, which seems like kind of a lot considering where both teams finished last year, but teams are riding high on a healthy San Francisco team right now.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the San Francisco 49ers to cover. The Lions just aren't a very good team, all in all.
I'm going to actually take the Lions here. I know that they've had their issues and they're not super talented, but I'm not a big believer in the 49ers right now. I think this could be a surprising game where the Lions keep it close. So I like the Niners to win, but the Lions to cover. Next, we have the Cardinals at the Tennessee Titans. Just a 3-point spread here for the Titans at home, which means, because home field advantage is typically 3 points, that this is about a pick'em game.
Yeah, what's it called for me? I love the Cards. I don't know why. I'm going to pick them plus 3. I think that they could keep it within those 3 points. I'm not sure they'll win, but I got to go with my gut.
Give me the Titans. I think that their offense is going to be too much for the Arizona Cardinals to handle. And on the other side, I have a bad feeling about this Week 1 game for the Cardinals. I'm really interested to see if this offense can evolve for Kyler Murray. I think they've kind of reached a point where they're hitting the wall with this air raid NFL offense, and I want to see Cliff Kingsbury adjust, but I don't think Week 1 is going to be a good showing for them. Next game, I'm going to take the Titans to cover, by the way. Forgot to mention. Next game, we have Seattle at Indianapolis. The Seahawks are favored by 3 points on the road.
God, I just remembered the Colts paid Marlon Mack this offseason, too. They gave him $2 million. God, I hate them. Give me Seattle to cover.
Until I see Carson Wentz and that Colts offense play with legitimate consistency, I'm going to have huge questions. The line is good. The backs are solid. They're getting paid like they are anyways. And I just have big questions about Carson Wentz and this receiving group. Who of these guys is going to get open? I mean, we've seen a nice rookie season from Michael Pittman when he was healthy. T.Y. Hilton's been dealing with injuries for a long time. He's aging out right now. Paris Campbell, Zach Pascal, which of these guys is going to emerge? I have big questions about the receivers, and if we learned anything from Carson Wentz's time in Philadelphia, it's that he struggled at times with all the issues the Eagles had with their receivers being healthy. So I like the Seahawks to cover in this one. Next, I have the Los Angeles Chargers at the Washington football team. LA is favored on the road, which kind of is my biggest surprise of the week.
LA is favored.
Oh, scratch that. I'm looking at the wrong. I'm looking at I forgot. Pigskin Pick'em does different lines. So Pigskin Pick'em actually has the Chargers as a -1.5. But
really? Okay, ESPN has them as Washington -1.
Yeah, so let's do that then. So Washington -1 then, because I'm going to take Washington to cover. They are my NFC representative in the Super Bowl, and even though they've completely reworked that offensive line in Los Angeles, I'm not a big believer in it yet.
This is a game I'm excited for. These are two teams that I'm pretty high on going into this season. It's really cool that they get to battle out week 1. I'm going to go with Washington to cover 2, as I also picked them to go to the Super Bowl this year. Washington covers.
Probably the snooze game of the week outside of another game between AFC South teams we'll get to in a moment here. The Jets at the Panthers, the Sam Darnold Bowl. The Jets are coming in as 4-point underdogs to Carolina. Ugh. This is avert your eyes unless if Zach Wilson balls out.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to pick the Jets +4. I'm not confident in either team. It's really dependent on Zach Wilson. If Zach Wilson comes out and sucks, it's going to be the Panthers easily. But, if Zach Wilson is decent, it should be a pretty competitive game. And this, coupled with the next game, is what made Survivor football this year so hard week 1. I'm doing a league where you don't get a single strike. If you get one wrong, you're out. It's one of the toughest week 1s ever, because all the 4 worst teams that you could pick against are all playing each other.
I will also take the Jets. I'm not a believer in that. I think that offensive line in Carolina is going to be absolutely overwhelmed by that improving Jets defensive front. The official snooze bowl of the week is going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Houston Texans. Jacksonville favored by 3, surprisingly enough. I actually think this is one of the few instances the Texans can win a football game this year, and I actually like them to win this game outright. Even though Tyrod Taylor's not as good of a quarterback as Trevor Lawrence is, what I've saw this preseason from the Jacksonville Jaguars, I just think that they have nothing going. I think Urban Meyer is going to be a massive failure. And for all the Texans' issues, they have a lot of decent depth players, and I think in week 1, that'll show out, and they'll win.
Yeah, the Texans played a lot of, Tier 3 and Tier 2 guys, so they don't really have, any top-tier guys on their team, but they do have a lot of, solid veterans. So I am also taking them to win outright. I think that they're going to actually win this game.
All right, into the 425 games. Probably the most interesting matchup of the week outside of maybe Pittsburgh and Buffalo is a rematch of the AFC divisional round between the Cleveland Browns and the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are favored by 5.5 at home. This could be a sneaky game in an early playoff preview.
Yeah, and at the moment it looks like Tyrann Mathieu might not actually play. I thought that he was fine. Because he got COVID, but he's not been cleared yet, and it is possible he needs 2 back-to-back negative tests. He might not play. That makes it even more I don't know, makes it closer. I still have the Chiefs covering, but this is going to be a solid game, I think.
Give me the Browns to plus the points, and I'll take them to win straight up too. I think this is going to be the shocker of the weekend. I picked the Browns as my Super Bowl winning team. I'm a believer in their roster, and I think that they've had all offseason to get ready for this team. The Chiefs, their offense isn't as scary as it was from a receiver standpoint as it used to be. Now you just have Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Everyone else behind them there's no Sammy Watkins right now. So I think that this is an offense that if you can take one of those guys away and you take chances with the other, you might be able to slow this offense down just enough. The obvious caveat is that you won't get as much pressure on the Chiefs, but I think the Browns' defensive line is going to be strong enough to still consistently generate enough pressure. And then on the other side, the Chiefs still actively play Frank Clark, which means I can't trust their defense. So I think the Browns will score, and score a lot. All right, next we have the Dolphins at the Patriots. New England is getting 3 points at home. I know Mac Jones played really well, Austin, but that also surprised me.
Yeah, give me the Dolphins +3 here. I'm still not a believer in the entire Patriots team. Mac Jones might be solid, but I'm not in love with their team as a whole. Dolphins +3.
I'm going to take the Patriots to cover here. A bit surprising, yes. And I'm not a huge believer in Mac Jones. I'm also not a big believer in Tua just yet. The big difference here for me is I just feel like the Dolphins are going to have a tough time with the Patriots offense in week 1 in that 2 tight end system. I think Damian Harris is going to have a big day. Last year, the Patriots beat the Dolphins in week 1 in Miami in a similar fashion by grinding the Dolphins down to a nub and running the ball. So I think it'll be similarly played out this week. Packers at Saints. Just a 2.5 point spread here, 3.5 point spread here for the Saints, rolling out Jameis Winston for his first start in 2 seasons.
Give me the Packers to win big. I have no idea why the spread is this close. This should be like Packers by a touchdown. New Orleans just got worse and worse. I'm not comprehending it. I don't know.
Did they really get worse at the quarterback position though? This is the thing that we were talking about when we were doing our season preview. They were the team that somehow ended up with the most different record than I expected when I was doing it. I just think that the big plays that Winston can provide, if he can cut down his turnover percentage even just by like a third, it'll be huge for this team. And I think that it'll offset a lot of the big plays that they didn't get from Drew Brees last season.
I'm just not sure with Michael Thomas not there. It's just literally Alvin Kamara. I don't like their wide receivers. I'm not a big fan of Jameis Winston. I'm not expecting a change in how he plays. I
think Marquez Callaway is legit.
Yeah, I don't know. Everyone's saying that. This is a rare case where I had no idea who that was coming into the season. Like, I study fantasy for fun, and like out of nowhere, there's this name Marquez Callaway, and I'm like, I don't even know who you are. I still don't. I don't know where he came from. Did he even play last year?
He played 11 games last year. He was a rookie. Caught 21 passes.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not someone I literally had never heard of him until this offseason. So I'm not sure how to feel.
All right. I'm going to take the Packers as well. I do think it won't be a blowout, but I do like the Packers to cover the 3.5 points here. Next, we move into the last 4 o'clock game. We have the Denver Broncos at the New York Giants. Broncos favored by 3 in this one. I'll take the Broncos. I do think it's a Super Bowl caliber roster with average quarterback play, but I think Teddy Bridgewater will do enough to take care of the ball in this one.
For me, I'm gonna have the Broncos covering too. I think the Giants are a dumpster fire.
Well, you said they were going 0-17, so here we go. This is the start.
Yeah, it's got to start the 0-17 train. Here we go.
Bears at Rams, a rematch of a game that's had some terrible quarterbacking the last few times they've played. The quarterbacks are a bit different, though. Andy Dalton and maybe Justin Fields at some point against Matthew Stafford. The Rams are getting 7.5 at home. Where are you going here?
For me, it's like close. I feel like the Bears' defense is really, really good, and it could keep this game close even though their offense just really sucks. But unfortunately, their offense just sucks too much, so I'm going to have the Rams cover.
I also took the Rams to cover. Final game, the Monday night game, the Ravens at Las Vegas, the first home game for the Raiders with fans. Baltimore is favored by 4. Even with all their issues, I got to take them over the Raiders. I think the Raiders' defense is that terrible, and they've reworked their offensive line, and the Ravens typically feast on that.
I was literally thinking the same thing. I was like, the Ravens are so messed up, but the Raiders are so mismanaged that the Ravens are going to cover here.
All right, and our lock of the week was Minnesota over the Cincinnati Bengals. All right, let's move into our final discussions about the game on Sunday and how we think it's going to go. So, X factors and bold predictions. Where are you leaning on this game?
So, for offensive X factor, I have Dan Moore, and defensive X factor, I have James Pierre. I want to take the new starters because there are guys that are new into the role, and I think it's going to be a big deal. Dan Moore is not the guy that was supposed to be starting this year. That's not a it's not a question. He was supposed to be maybe the swing tackle, but he's here. He's starting, and I think he's gonna make a big difference on Big Ben's blind side and blocking for Najee Harris and stuff. So I have him as X factor there. Defense, James Pierre. I already kind of went over it. I think that he's gonna have a good chance of being matched up with Stefan Diggs a good amount of time in this game, and that's really scary. That is baptism by fire as much as I can, as basically by definition. So I think that he is going to be the difference maker in this game, how well he does. As for my bold predictions, I have that Dan Moore pancakes someone and it leads to a 25+ yard run. I have James Pierre forcing 2 turnovers in his starting debut. And then my third is that the pass rush will be bad in this game for both sides, generating no sacks at all in this entire game. Not from the Bills, not from the Steelers. I think that
streak ends.
Both are going to have a tough time. Yeah, the streak is going to end in this game. It's been close, and now it's really going to end. How about your X factors and your bold
I'm going to go with Kendrick Green and TJ Watt. Look, TJ Watt just signed that massive extension, which, by the way, I don't think we really touched on, did we?
Oh, we didn't.
Yeah.
Pretty important news.
Yeah. How about us? We're really locked on today. So the TJ Watt drama, that's finally over. He signed his new contract, which the Steelers ended up breaking policy on to get $80 million in guaranteed, worth up to $112 million in total on his 4-year extension. And certainly made a lot of waves around the NFL world. And the Steelers have their franchise guy locked up on defense. And pretty big win for the players as far as negotiations go.
Yeah, huge for Minkah Fitzpatrick next year. I mean, basically the Steelers can't return unless they're really going to do what I said that they should do and say, we're going to put our foot down and we're not doing that so you could walk. But I would not like that. I think that it's a new era for the Steelers. I like the contract. I think it's solid. I think 4 years is good. It lets him get back into the market probably one more time to get a bigger pay. At that time, he'll probably be a $30 million man, assuming he keeps up his play. But I still think I would have just paid him $30 million and lowered the guarantees. But that's neither here nor there. I think the contract is good how it is. So
yeah, I'm just glad it's over.
Good job on both sides.
Thankfully, it's over, and he practiced.
I'm glad it's over.
And that he's been practicing. Still not sure about his overall workload. What do you think that's going to be?
Since he's been in shape, I think it'll be the same. We'll see, though. This week is going to be telling because he finally got to practice with the team this entire week. So Steelers probably made their decision based on what he showed there. And if he was gassed, then he'll probably have to be pulled out, which isn't the biggest deal with Melvin Ingram.
It is potentially a problem if Alex Highsmith doesn't play or play much.
Yeah, then that would not be good because then you have Jameer Jones in there. And I liked him in the preseason, but I don't know about regular season.
As far as the game goes, I have him highlighted because now he's the new big man on campus. I mean, he has been, but now he's being paid like it, and he's been quiet against Buffalo the last 2 times they've played. He needs to perform well, and he needs to have a couple of those impact plays that he's being paid for. And if he can do that, it'll really help the Steelers in an effort to try to win the game. And I went on the other side with Kendrick Green because, like you said, he's a rookie. The Steelers struggled to protect the quarterback the last 2 times they were in Buffalo, particularly 2019 and the line calls. And that's something that he's got to be on the ball for as a rookie. The Bills, again, they don't have a dominant pass rusher, so they like to be confusing, and they like to do it with numbers. So you really hope that the amount of times that the Steelers' offensive line gets fooled by a blitz is very, very minimal. And a big part of it's going to be on Kendrick Green. So if Ben Roethlisberger is getting blindsided early on in this game, even though they had the amount of guys to do the blocking, you'll know that it's up to a guy like Kendrick Green to change that. As far as my bold predictions go, I think I said it when we were watching it in the preseason that the Steelers were lining up Joe Schobert and Robert Spillane on wide receivers. I think we said at the time that Cole Beasley was going to go off in this game. And all the people that don't like him because of the vaccination stuff are going to have to watch him have a big game, because the Steelers refuse to cover receivers in the slot with actual cornerbacks and defensive backs, but rather linebackers. So poor Joe Schobert and Devin Bush are going to be chasing around Cole Beasley every day, who will catch 12 passes at least for at least 160 yards. And then my other bold prediction is that Ben Roethlisberger will attempt 45 passes in this game and will be sacked at least 3 times. All right, we've laid it all out, Austin. Steelers and Bills, Buffalo 6.5-point favorites at home, 1 o'clock on Sunday. Where are you at?
So I think that the Bills just completely outmatched the Steelers in this game. It's unfortunately how it is. I obviously hope to be wrong. I never root against my own team, but I have the Bills winning 36-21 in a not particularly close battle. I think that probably it'll be like 36-14 coming down the stretch, and the Steelers get like one last touchdown kind of to end the game. But yeah, I hope I'm wrong.
This is a difficult draw for Week 1. There aren't many teams that the Steelers could have played in Week 1 that would have been a harder draw than in Buffalo. I have big concerns about the way this team will play offensively, considering the crowd. I have big concerns about how the Steelers will be able to put together long drives and if they'll be able to create big plays consistently. I feel good about the defense. I think they'll be able to hold their own, but much like last year, I think it'll take a few big plays for them to keep the Steelers' offense in the game. Again, this is a tough draw. The Steelers are probably going to have to be able to get at least 3 explosive plays, I think, in this one minimum to have a chance, if not more. This will be one of the biggest wins in recent Steelers memory if they can somehow come up with a win this week. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Bills are going to win. I'll go with 27-16. So I'll say Bills win 27-16 and therefore cover. So against my heart, but probably with my head in this one.
Yeah, it do be like that. It really do.
All right.
I think that kind of wraps it
up. Any final thoughts here?
Just because I like to take my victories when I have them, because I'm wrong about like guys like Devin White. Jordan Mailata just got a huge extension and is someone I really wanted in the 7th round.
One of the original guys we looked at, right?
Yeah, he signed a 4-year, $64 million extension. 3 years ago, he wasn't even playing football, but he'd never played football at all, but I loved his intangibles. I loved what he showed in rugby. And now he's the starting left tackle in Philadelphia, and that is really cool. And other NFL news is that Taylor Decker is going on IR, which means that at least up until Week 3, Penei Sewell is going to be starting at left tackle for the Lions. He's going back to his original spot where he probably should have been from the get-go, but so be it.
All right. Well, until next time, we'll be back talking the results of Steelers-Bills in Week 1 in the NFL season following Sunday. So probably Tuesday is when we'll record, so it should be up by Wednesday. Austin, thank you for joining me. Enjoy the game wherever you watch it, and we'll be back.
Yeah, everybody enjoy the game.
All right. Until next time, thank you, as always, for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with Austin and John. Feel free to check us out on our new home for our podcast, Anchor.fm. You can find us. We're named Stronger Than Steel Podcast. And you can find our podcast anywhere on that website. And if you have any questions about the show, any constructive feedback you want to offer, please feel free to email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, thank you for listening to the podcast, and enjoy the game on Sunday. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.